Hello and welcome to our July webinar. This is Dr. T. Wu and I'll be the presenter of today's topic, which is Beyond PMP, focusing on the program and portfolio management. We have a fairly full presentation, but we can also use questions. I generally like interactive questions. For the most part, because of the crowd we have, we are muting everybody's line, but you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can use the chat box in Zoom and ask questions. Again, we'll answer those questions in the most logical spot. And if you do unmute yourself, please remute yourself so we minimize the background noise. This webinar is being recorded and we'll post it on YouTube once this is done. So without further ado, I am going to start. As I mentioned, I'm Dr. T. Wu, and I am the CEO of PMO Advisory. I am also a certified project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, and risk management. And I do quite a bit of work with PMI, different chapters, global, as well as on the U.S. tag team representing U.S. on the International Standard Committee. For those of you who know me, I'm also a practitioner. Being a practitioner, at one point I was the head of global project services for one of the large companies. But since then, I have started my training company and do more consulting, as well as work on the various standard committee and writing certain books. I'm a contributor to these books, for example, by PMI. So our agenda today is really to make an objective case for one professional PMP. Over 910,000 people in the world with active PMP and probably well over a million if you include people who at least didn't continue the active PMP. I think moving beyond PMP is important for the profession and important for us. There's always a question in the marketplace, which one's better? Should I go program management or portfolio management? And I'm going to endeavor to answer that question at least the best I can. Then we'll look at analysis of PgMP and PfMP and just the current situation. What are the certifications around the world? What are some of the challenges and pitfalls? And finally, of course, to our own horn a little bit, I think we are one of the best provider of PMO, PgMP, and portfolio management courses. So we'll make a case why. Very quickly, why do we want PgMP or PfMP? And I think the case is fueled largely by the growth of the project management profession. And you could see that, of course, in the very rapid evolution of internet-based technology. So, for example, on this chart, you could see that it took nearly 180 years for telephone, for example, to achieve 95% critical mass, and 30 years for color TV. Internet, just in a mere 20 years, already achieved 60, and this graph didn't go on. But right now, internet is ubiquitous. So all that fuels the evolution of technology. Here you can see the adoption of technology over time. And very, very clearly that we are in a very hyper-competitive world, especially with these evolution of technology. The growth of PMP. Now, the dotted line is approximate. I went back to the historical data where we have them and sort of plot out the growth of the profession. But in the last 20 years, especially the last 15, you can see that the growth of PMP has significantly taken off. And today, in some fields, especially working for federal government, for example, having PMP is just bread and butter. If you don't have PMP, you pretty much don't qualify for a lot of the federal jobs. And I suspect that over time, the other certifications like PgMP and PfMP will also become mandatory. I know PgMP already is. We're already getting some feedback from the different sectors in which job application actually talk about PgMP. So that's the first reason, competitive reason. The second reason is that as project becoming a primary vehicle for making changes in organization, the results are just poor. The Standish Report, many of you may be familiar with Standish. They are a great consulting company. They have done a longitudinal study of this information technology project space since 1994, I believe. And this report is a couple of years outdated, but it shows the basic premise. In this case, they group project into 3 buckets: successful, challenge, and failed. Successful project are what you expected. These are very successful project. Most people will say, good job. Failed project is also pretty clear. In Standish studies, failed project are projects that never actually finish. So it's not even that they're handicapped by, let's say, spending too much time or money. That would be the challenge category. Failed projects are categorically failed. So you have the middle, the challenge, at around 50%, pretty steady over the course of these years. And what this report shows to me is that there's just a lot of improvement. And projects fail for many reasons, of course, but part of the reason I think is, one, selecting the right project to work on. Did the organization have enough support, champions who really want that project to happen? Of course, that's the realm of portfolio management. In other cases, the project is integrated with something else. It's not just a pure IT project or a single IT project, but rather it's a collection of projects coming together to deliver greater benefit. And that's a realm of program management. So in those cases, I believe as the profession becomes deeper ingrained in our society, it becomes more important to look at the program and portfolio management. This is another chart from the PMI study back in 2016, and really highlighted the waste on project. In this case, essentially what this is saying is for every $1 billion vested in projects, 122 million, or roughly 12%, are just wasted. And you can see sort of this across the various type of factors. Meeting business intent, for example, hovers only around 65%. That's hardly a wonderful number. And it gets even worse, of course, if you look at completing on time or even deemed failure, steady around 15–16%. This study, while not exactly the same as the earlier report on the Standish, but it echoes relatively the same magnitude. Let's go beyond the second insight and look at the third insight. Project management certification in some sectors are just no longer good to have. And I think I started by saying the federal jobs, they're must-have, right? That is going to become true and more true as we move forward. So, for example, in our detailed analysis, we actually look at 5 nations, but today we're just going to focus on the U.S. In the United States, we have the PMIAA. For those of you that's not familiar with this law was enacted at the tail end of the Obama administration, and it's signed into the law, which essentially requires the Office of Budget Management to apply project program portfolio management to the projects in the federal government side. And this law called PMIAA, or Program Management Improvement Accountability Act, sets up essentially the infrastructure for the various federal agencies to improve and manage and evaluate and grow this profession. So as we know, a lot of the federal laws also gets piggybacked off state and municipal. So as we anticipate that even though this law is just passed in 2016 and the government doesn't move all that fast, this is barely 3 years later, it will start to permeate, I think, in the entire government sector beyond just the federal government. And while we don't have time to fully look through the other analyses, but you could see the government of UK, Switzerland, Canada, all of them are doing more in this space. I was recently, last year, invited to speak in China by one of the Office for Foreign Experts of the Chinese government. And there was me presenting in front of an audience who was at an auto manufacturing company in Northeast China. And to be honest, I thought we were expecting a couple hundred people, maybe 200. In the audience there was already somewhere around 600 people. And there was another multiple satellite offices you could see in the monitor above, totally tied in, somewhere around 2,000 people tied into that meeting. So you could see the tremendous amount of interest in project management, not only in the United States, but also around the world. Again, as people have questions, feel free to jump in. You could unmute yourself. I did hear some noise before, so I muted everybody. But if you have questions, feel free to use the chat message. The last of the major insight, I think, is that today's endeavor are just becoming larger. There's a lot of mega projects, more complex, a lot of integration, a lot of bleeding edge technology, more ambiguous. And that, of course, gives the rise to agile to deal with this uncertainty and ambiguity. But collectively, I think it's time for program portfolio management to take center stage. And as a part of my work with the standard committee of PMI, writing the latest standard for portfolio management, we recognize that portfolio management is one of the major differentiators. Because not only do you require project and program to do the project right, you also require portfolio management to do the right project in the first place. And case in point is a large complex project as shown in this case by a Boeing. This is the this is the Airbus A380 plane assembly line, right? So all those integrated parts have to come together to produce a viable product. There are also personal reasons. So I mentioned 4 very objective reasons. And I think these reasons stand on its own. I don't think they're refutable. You could argue over how intense the factors are, but they are clearly there. For personal reasons, there are a bunch of other reasons, right? Competitive reason. How do you compete in the marketplace if you're a project professional? And frankly, practically everybody today have PMP. So how do you outcompete that 900,000 active PMPs? Professional reason. One of the biggest, I think, reason that people should pursue one of the certification, or at least pursue the knowledge, if not for the certification, is that while your understanding of project program portfolio management and your actual practice may deviate from that of PMI or the ISO, International Standard Organization, what they provide is a beautiful framework with a nice ribbon to tie everything together. I know that when I became PgMP in 2010, for example, I was a practicing program manager for many years by then. But most of my knowledge are in discrete pieces. I react. I learn new things on the job because I needed to. For example, setting up a governance team. Do I really know how that is intimately tied to performance, tied to stakeholder engagement, or tied to strategic alignment? Yes, I have some notion, but never really looked at it from a holistic perspective. So what program management standard or portfolio management later on, or project manager before that, gives me the ability to tie everything together. And then, frankly, there's that personal satisfaction. Once you have a very clear framework in your mind, even though the framework can still be improved and there are deficiencies, knowledge constantly is expanding, but it gives me immense satisfaction to know, at least at that stage, at that point in my career, I have that clarity in which I didn't have before. So that's what I think some of the personal reasons people may want to consider moving. One of the work I have done, as many of you know me, I am also a university professor. I recently just came back from teaching at China Europe International Business School in Shanghai. I just came back a couple of days ago, so I'm still slightly jet lagged. Is to work with students on one hand, but on the other hand, also work with the topmost level program portfolio management. And PMO Advisory is also spearheading a lot of research and development in the idea of Chief Project Officer. So here you could see the overall career map as I have laid out. And the career map itself shows the growth from a very entry level project team member to grow steadily to project analyst, junior project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, and the CPO, Chief Project Officer. And I would say Chief Project Officer today, while it is a reality, there are about, I estimate, about 2,000 CPOs out there. In some ways, it's really more of an aspirational role. And that's one reason I have an interest in clarifying what that role is. But it shows a clear growth of profession, of accountability, of responsibility. And I think what PMI, as well as other organizations, have done is laid out a very nice roadmap that at between, let's say, 0 and 4 years, entry level, CAPM is very good. Beyond 4 years, PMP If you're in the specialty, you could look at ACP, PBA, RMP, SP. Going beyond that, you're now managing large projects or collection of projects. You're now entering the program realm, which often I consider program to be sort of the height of the technical realm of project management, because by the time you're done with program management, from a technical project management, program management skill perspective, it's largely settled. I mean, there are a couple more things you could argue. For example, portfolio analysis can also be a part of that, of course. But generally speaking, now you're really managing, you have a good handle managing large projects and programs. Portfolio management is really, in some ways, shifting from the technical route of project management and moving into the business track, the executive track. Not only are you looking at what are the best investment options, you're also asking, how do I create a governance model that's aligned with the enterprise governance, so you don't have to recreate the wheel. And then beyond that, chief project officer, which I believe is a instrumental party, executive in charge of all the things that is execution oriented in the organization, especially the one time like the project program portfolio. So that's another topic. We'll talk about that at a future meeting. So let's go to the second question. Which one of these is better for you? Now, I sort of already alluded to that as I was presenting the last slide. But program management is a group of highly related projects. And I do the one word highly related. PMI doesn't have this word. To me, if you have a very loosely created program, you're actually approaching that of a portfolio, because portfolio is a collection of logical projects and programs. But a program, it is, to me, if you really look at a serious program out in the market, it basically means that the building block, the components of program, has to all be relatively successful at the minimum in order to achieve the overall goals and objective of that program. So in this case, program is the endeavor of managing that collection. In some ways, you could look at it, the idea of 1 + 1 more than 2, because one component plus another component, they get, let's say, benefits that's just additive. But if you apply program management, you're looking at to, say, reduce costs by economy of scale or scope, or deliver additional benefits that otherwise just not inherent in the individual project by themselves. So they're really ideal for those who want to become a super doer. And there's a lot of credibility. It's very hard to be that doer. In some ways, you want to be the captain of your own ship. That's what program managers like. My analogy, I'm a Trekkie fan, at least when I was younger. This is like James T. Kirk, who actually gave up his admiralship in the Star Trek 4, the voyage home, to rather become a captain to obviously go save the history of mankind. So you really want to be directly in charge of a large endeavor. You deliver concrete benefit to the organization. You could feel it, you could touch it. You're building something, right? You're either building a new product, new capability, new service. And in many ways, this to me is the height of the technical project management ladder. If you are a known, competent program manager, you can get pretty much any large program done in an organization and become a really valuable member. The portfolio management, of course, is more about the collection of portfolios, collection of projects and programs. The decision factor here shifts away from just execution. It looks at more the strategic element, the alignment with the corporate goals and objective, the alignment with the whatever business unit strategies. Then helping make that large investment choices. Usually in a healthy company, there are far more ideas than they have funding or resource to work on. That is a healthy side, by the way. A unhealthy side is that you have more money, but you don't have a lot of ideas, and hence you're just wasting money on potentially poor ideas. So a healthy company generally are confronting with sort of this resource limitation, if not a resource crisis, because they have so much ideas, but they only could invest a handful. And portfolio management helped them make that selection. But more than important than strategic alignment in making that selection, to me, is actually the third major piece of portfolio management, which is the governance setup. In any of these larger organizations, or in any organization that I think really worthwhile to practice portfolio management, it's probably very political. In other words, it has reached a critical size that there ought to be internally differences in ideas and opinions and on how the organization should move forward. When that becomes dysfunctional, of course, it could be a dysfunctional organization, but generally speaking, that's actually a good creative tension in the organization. So you need governance to balance the various views and perspectives and still marching to a common core. And so to me, governance is also that integrated component of portfolio management make it so valuable. Now, clearly, as you can see, if you are a portfolio manager playing that type of role, meaning massaging politics, creating governance, making tough decisions, making trade-offs, working the, sort of the phones, so to speak. These days could be just virtual technologies and conferences. Then you are more on the business side than just the pure technical side of managing engagement. Yes, there are technical skills like business analysis, portfolio analysis, pros and cons of different financial analysis or other success factors, performance metrics, and resource capabilities. But most of it is really working on the soft underbelly of the organization. So this is when you really become a senior executive or experienced executive and leader and helping the organization not only make these decisions or recommend these decisions, but also implement them. You have to enjoy working at this organizational level challenges. You have to be comfortable with politics, confronting very ambiguous situations and scenarios. And sometimes, of course, scenario change. Economy, like the US, for example, there's foreshadowing, maybe there is going to be a mild recession coming, or it can't continue to grow forever. So how do you adjust the portfolio to cope with those changes? Those are all important questions. And as a portfolio manager, ultimately, you're focusing more on the strategic value and have to have the willingness to take on often these difficult and controversial trade-off decisions. And that includes profit and loss responsibilities for the underlying endeavor. So those are the choices. Quickly, if you look at the qualifications, the qualification for program manager and portfolio manager actually differs quite significantly. So on this chart, you see on the left side is the PgMP program manager qualification for the PMI certification. The right side is the portfolio manager. Just focus on program manager for a second. It's basically a, I would say, highly advanced project management set of skills. So you need to have project management. You do not need to have PMP, just to be clear. All 8 PMI certification are independent of each other. So you don't need to have any certification in order to get another certification. Here, the emphasis is on program management experience. So you need to have 4 years or roughly 4 years. So combined, you need at least 8 years of experience. Just as a trick for those of you on the phone, if you fill out the application, make sure you justify the PM experience as well, project management. Because we had worked with clients who actually didn't get their certification approved, not because of their program management experience, but because they didn't clearly demonstrate the 4 years of project management experience. So that actually caught me off a little guard. I was thinking they probably PMI look at the program more, which they do, but project management still count. On the portfolio side, this is where the profit and loss, sort of the general business mentality really kicks in. And PMI want its professional portfolio manager to understand the weight of that decision, the weight of that responsibility to have that profit and loss. So you could see that it put 8 years, minimum of 8 years of professional business experience in the strategic investment side. So that is a fairly tall order because you could be a business professional, but you may not be focusing on the strategic investment side. That also means, by the way, PMI try to attract professionals outside of the traditional project management track. For example, Office of CFO, 20 years ago, They just care. I'm greatly simplifying, so for anybody who works for CFO, I apologize right up front. But they largely looking at the financial side of the organization, how that finance is achieved, meaning through investments of alternative products or investment vehicles versus organic growth, matters a little bit less than today. Because today, the shareholder is essentially saying to, let's say, the management of Apple or any large company is, please invest in your company. We want to see organic growth. We want to see what you can do with the free cash flow you have. That's ours, by the way, but we give it to you to invest in Apple product, not for Apple to go buy a mutual fund and earn something somewhere else. So for those professionals in that space, even in the office of CFO, for example, now you have to focus on the organic utilization of that free cash flow to generate new products and new revenues and new profitability for the company. And of course, all of those new products and services and et cetera are in the world now of project portfolio management. So this is a very clear message in my mind from PMI to the world of business professional is portfolio manager is more than just project management. If you have project management, great, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite. It's really designed for people who are going to be playing that leadership role of allocating that precious financial resource of the organization. Aside from that general experience, then you need to have either 7 or 4 years of experience, depending on your education background. And it also states 15 in the past 15 years. So it doesn't want to have the experience that's so outdated. So this experience has to be relatively fresh. I have friends who are more senior than me in the industry, who I look up to and mentor me throughout the years, who actually couldn't qualify for PfMP, partly because of the 15 years experience. They are retiring, so they are beyond the qualifications here. Here, just give you a quick up-to-date look. This is up-to-date as of June 2019 on the world of certification. PfMP, for the first time, just exceeded 700 certification holders, so 701. PgMP right now stands at around 2,600 professionals. And of course, in relation to what I mentioned, PMP, sort of the biggest of all, is around 915,000. Okay, let's take a deeper dive and look at where in the world do all the PMPs, or PgMP, sorry, in this case, reside. United States is clearly almost representing close to 40-some% of the total PgMP population, and little, almost 1,100 people. And this number is actually pretty recent. We just pulled the number. We had to do analysis, so you can't pull this easily. And this number may be off by a little bit, but it's around 1,100 for United States. Surprisingly, by the way, China has the second highest at 282, and the third by India at 243. Canadian, I think by population-wise, is always very high on the list at 160. And not a surprise, Australia also has 82. Australians are very, very sharp in project management from my experience. So you can see the sort of the top 25 countries. For PfMP, the numbers, the location a little bit different. It shifts a little bit, but not that far, because if you look at the top 6, the 5 on PgMP is also on the PfMP, and that has the United States, the Canada, India, Saudi Arabia, China, and number 6 would be Australia. China, by the way, at 38 is actually quite surprising, because PfMP today is not available in China. So for a Chinese national, or people reside in China, to actually obtain PfMP, they have to go outside of the country. Hong Kong or Japan are the 2 closest destinations. I do some work in China, as I mentioned, and even teach there. So I have a fairly good global perspective. Saudi Arabia, by the way, it's also worth mentioning, and it's pretty high here at number 4. And number 6 on PgMP in terms of the holders, Saudi Arabia is also expanding very rapidly. They have a lot of major infrastructure projects in the nation, in that country, and they use a lot of solid professional. So for those of you who's thinking of moving to Middle East, that country is a hotbed of project management activities. Again, if there are any questions, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'll just plow ahead. The application process for both are exactly the same. Obviously, different questions given it is different profession, but from a process perspective, it's the same. Really occurs in 2 phases, the application and then the examination. The application itself can be further broken down into 2 to 3 steps, depending how you look at it. There is the initial submission, in which the PMI do a completion check. There's a process in the middle. Some people get called out for it, which is the audit. And in the audit, you have 90 days to comply. And then assuming everything passed through, then finally goes to the panel review, which essentially are other peers, program portfolio management experts. They will look at the application and they will judge whether your application is suitable for the respective certification. And this can take about up to 4 weeks. I know in some rare occasions it may even be a little bit longer, mainly because these are volunteer reviewers, and given how busy, as I'm sure you can imagine yourself to be, they're likely busy as well. So on occasion, you may have to actually chase them. Assuming you get through the application process, then you have an entire year to take the exam. And you could take the exam up to 3 times. So essentially you could fail 2 times and of course pass on the 3rd. Each time though, there is a re-examine fee. And if you do fail for the 3rd time, unfortunately, then you have to wait for a year and start the process over again. What are some of the challenges and pitfalls? There are quite many of them. We just summarize some of the most common ones we see here. So for example, in the application process, the 3 common pitfalls we see is 1, insufficient experience on the surface. On the surface, meaning your title may not be program manager, right? Your title could be something else. For example, you could actually have a project management title and work in program management. Whenever on the surface, the first gloss, it doesn't quite match that of the PMI, you now have to dig a little deeper. So in that means that even if you, for example, don't have all the years of experience of program management, at least by your title. So let's say you do have a program management title, and let's say by the application process, you don't quite have the 60,000 hours of program manager because you're promoted only 2 years ago. You may still have to be able to qualify because you could dig deeper into your background and to see when you had, let's say, the previous title as senior project manager, you may very well be already managing programs. And that would be true, of course, for portfolio as well. So I would say most professional, especially if your overall qualification clearly exceed that of the requirement by PMI, you may have to dig a little bit deeper. And these experiences really count. In some cases, you can also apply even your volunteering responsibilities and work experiences. A lot of people work on PMI, for example, chapter level, global level. There are various projects and programs throughout the organization. The second one is I would say a big mismatch between your practical experience and PMI mindset. This is especially true in the initial completion review. As I mentioned, applications have 3 processes: completion review, audit, which some people don't have, so it could be 2, and then the peer review. Ironically, I found that more people have difficulty getting to the completion review than actually the peer review. The reason being is that peer review, of course, are experienced people. They can read between the line. So as they read your application, they will say, oh, John or Jane has this experience. Maybe it's not classic by the book, program, or portfolio management experience, but clearly indicates that they're working in that space. The completion review, though, is a little bit different because it's read by PMI professional, and some of them can be relatively new to the field. So they're looking at it more sort of comparing to the book, the standard that they have. So unless you explain and describe a lot of your roles and responsibilities in that exact term, or at least closer term, they may reject it because it doesn't feel right. Ironically, from our experience, we actually see more people getting rejected from the completion review than the peer review. The third is inability to concisely express yourself, especially English is not your first language. Both of these applications have 5 short essays, and each essay is limited by 500 words, which is actually not a lot of words. Our general recommendation is you may want to write concisely, hire a good editor, hire a good English person to make sure you cover the key points. One of the other things we saw is do not use a translator. If your native language is not English, you are quite reasonable to write it in your native language and, of course, go translate it, which is not a bad idea. The problem is don't go use Google Translate or one of the translation software because they just make a mess of things. And for that matter, later we'll talk about our offering, one of which is application review. We really can't help you if we can't understand your application either. So this is where you probably do need to invest a little bit of money to hire somebody in your local language who's proficient in English and help you translate, but write it in a natural English language. You don't have to be native, by the way, speaking. You just have to be fluent and understandable. So that was the application process. Let's look at what are some of the recommendations for the exam process. In some ways, there are similarities. So the first one is also PMI standard on mindsets. Similar to the application process, you need to have that deeper understanding and working knowledge of the standard. You should read the relevant standards and before you fill out the application, definitely before you obviously pursue the exam itself. What's more important than just the language is also the mindset. PMI has a particular mindset, for example, portfolio manager as profit and loss, as a business owner, as a strategic thinker, a strategic investment thinker. You know, those are all different set of mindset. The second is correct versus best answer. Program and portfolio management exams are not really heavily into process knowledge. I mean, there's of course some flavor of that, meaning the sequence, or for those of you who's used to PMP, you know, the inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques, the process order. Yes, there's some bit of that, of course, on the PMI exam. I mean, after all, these follow certain life cycle. But more importantly is ability to answer the right, find the best answer in the scenario, in the context of the scenario given. In a lot of the exam questions out of the 4 multiple choice, probably only one is just outright wrong. The 2, 3, and 4 at least have some level of validity and correctness to it. So your job isn't finding a correct answer versus finding the best answer. And then number 3 problem, and this is where most people, and by the way, I think the move to Pearson VUE is going to aggravate this problem actually, is that it's 4 hours. You have 170 questions, roughly 85 seconds per question. And in our analysis, you know, average adults read somewhere between 150 to 200 words casually. That's if you're reading a fictional book. For technical writing, anything that is a little bit difficult to read, it's probably about 100 words. If you're reading for technical things and for comprehension, it's even going to be slower than that. So we envision, even if you're a fast reader, you probably only could get 80 to 90 words a minute. If you think about the question, multiple choice question that you probably have seen some, and to look at the answer and that's composed of words, those questions alone plus the answer is likely to be in that neighborhood of 80 to 100 words easily, right? This paragraph that you see number 3 itself is 83 words. So that means from an average reading capability perspective, you barely have enough time to read, not to mention you have to think through, select the right answer. So that is a tremendous challenge and creates a lot of stress. So obviously, those are things you need to practice and try to overcome. Some general suggestion for the exam, develop a test preparation strategy. I don't think, by the way, the exams are super, super impossible. And you should give yourself at least 60 days. I think 60 concentrated days, concentrated meaning you're willing to spend at least an hour or two per day, is a lot better than spread across a year or even half a year. But a minimal 60 days. I think 90 days is actually better, and even 120 days, which is a bit on the outlier side. So create a plan, stick to your plan, immerse yourself, if not every day, at least every other day, and create a test strategy and practice it. One of the most difficult things for people who study alone, by the way, and by the way, these exams, you can study alone. So we do some published books, for example, for people who want to sort of do it yourself. But the difficult part when you do it yourself is knowing that you're actually making progress, have some kind of tracker or simulated exam that gives you the ability to know, okay, today I got 50%, tomorrow I'm 52, and obviously I'm moving the right direction. That's pretty hard. So that's our first recommendation. Come up with a strategy, minimal 60 days, preferably 90 to 120 days. Second is preparation, final preparation before the exam. A lot of people study to the last minute. That's not really good for adults. We don't actually remember things in a very short order. Cramming doesn't work very well, especially because the exam is pretty long. You actually rather go to exam awake and fresh and fresh from a night's sleep than to go in there tired and memorize a bunch of things you probably can't recall anyway. So the final preparation during the exam is really important. Sleep right, even do exercises if you can on the day before. On the day itself, of course, the 4-hour exam, you have to sort of know your body's rhythm and cadence. You don't want to go too full. You don't want to go too hungry. You don't want to stress yourself out before you go to the exam, etc. So plan accordingly and don't leave any blank answer. There is no penalty for the wrong answer. If you don't know it, guess. And you have at least 25% chance of getting things right. So preparing for the exam. As we mentioned, self-study and what I call passive learning. Passive learning meaning getting a learning. There are courses out there, I'm sure people see. They work. They just require a lot more time. They're not very expensive. That's a good news. And if you spend enough time on it, frankly, I studied both of my exam, but that's only because at the time there weren't any courses or any really good books. When I studied for PgMP, for example, I actually failed the first time taking the exam because 2 days prior to the exam day, I found that I studied for the wrong version. I was studying on, at the time, I think, version 1 or 2, but you went to the next version, 2 or 3. And of course, internet being what it was back then, 2010, not as popular as today, there were just no information. I didn't find out until 2 days before the exam and happily failed it. That also means, of course, on the market, there was no book for PgMP at the time for the latest exam. So you're able to get through it. But the negatives are also pretty obvious. One is, if you have questions, who do you go to ask, get answers? There's really not a lot of people in the world, PgMP, PfMP, to get that answer. How to stay motivated, especially because if you don't have a way to even track and measure progress. So you don't know how well you're doing. And frankly, retaking the exam of $600 is a pretty expensive deal. But self-study do work, and it is ideal for people with tight budget and plenty of time. The other side, of course, is you could pursue active learning, and there are choices today for both PgMP and PfMP. The pros is you get expert support, accelerated learning, precise progress metric, assuming the vendor offered that, so you should look at that as a feature. That is not actually universally true, the third bullet. And you also can actually earn PDUs in the case of PgMP for PMP in most cases. But that's only if you go to a REP, a registered education provider, for your training. The cons, of course, it costs more money. It's more ideal for people who have, let's say, companies supporting them, even paying part of the ways. And also for people who really have busy schedules. So in that case, they have limited time and value their time, perhaps more than just spending money on the training. So that gets into the final topic, which of course I have to do a plug for my company. PMO Advisory offers boot camps for now easily for 4 years for portfolio management. We believe we're the first in the industry. My book actually came out just shortly after another person's book, Dr. Ginger Levin's book, by only a couple of days. And so we are one of the longest provider on the market for the PfMP. PgMP we started offering in around 2015. So by now we offer more than 4 years as well. So PfMP, come to think about it, is almost 5 years. We offer our course predominantly in 2 major formats for public. We do offer classes to companies and we just customize and do it on site. But for the general public, we have the traditional 2-day classes. And those are 2 consecutive days. And then the live virtual. The live virtual, we adopted a more loose framework because we wanted people to have time in between the sessions to absorb the material and read it so they can maximize the benefit. So we tend to have it in 3 sessions across 4 hours each. So total, it's about 12 hours, sometimes a little bit north of that. Our boot camp comes standard with really the following: live real-time instruction by certified experts. And these experts are practitioners. None of our trainers are just purely trainers. So we train real life. That's true for all our courses. Full access to exam simulator. We built some of the largest exam simulators in the industry. I think we have over 1,900 active questions for PgMP and 1,850, give or take, for PfMP. We provide all the digital materials, workbooks, content, job aids. We also provide complimentary application review for people attending this webinar in real time. And then we also provide training. So our training package is also different from most in the industry. We provide essentially 4 levels of support: 30 days, 60 days, 180 days, and 365 days. And coming out standard, our base package is 30 days. And for that reason, we're one of the few in the industry that provides post-training support for the certification boot camps. What we like to believe is we provide one of the most comprehensive package in the industry. We don't know anybody else who really do what we do. During the support period of 30 days, 60, 180, or 365, you have full access to essentially everything that we have. And you could even come back to the same class. For people who attended our classroom class, you also could attend our online class, since classroom is a more premium product. And just to be clear and transparent, if you do sign up for 30 days, chances are we probably don't have another class within those 30 days for you to come back to. There's some exceptions to that rule, but I just don't want to oversell people. You have full access to our full exam simulator. You have access to our pre-recorded classes, which what we do is for most of our live virtual class, we record them and we make some of the best ones available. We also have email support. So as you confront those hard questions and you don't know how to best answer them, you can email us. And in some cases, depending whether we could explain email or not, we may even suggest phone calls to provide that explanation. So you see that our support is as comprehensive as anything that we can think of. And if you even have additional suggestions, you may also submit to us as well, and we'll consider them. Because we want to be there for our customers. PMO Advisory is not just about making money. We sell you a training, you attend training, we're done. We're here to help you to actually finish and take you through that journey. One note on the 180 days and 365 days. We designed these because people in this camp, PgMP, PfMP, are usually senior and busy people. And if they ask company to reimburse, in the early days, some people had to explain and go back to a company twice because of the extension. We just decided, you know what, maybe we offer these extensive packages, let's say 365, so you only need to get the budget approval for one time. And frankly, if you have 1 year by PMI to take the test and you're not ready that year, then something else is wrong. So that's why we made it so extensive to include that entire year. Our best selling point is that we have 100% pass rate as of right now for those that follow our method. And our method is really simple. It's not an insurmountable method. As I mentioned, we built our own simulator so we could track your progress. And that progress is something you could bank on. So you know yourself, if you're taking our simulator, let's say one day you got 60, a week later you got 65, a week later you got 70. Well, that's clear progress. Right. So our method is simple, based on actual metrics for those who actually attain 75% or higher 2 consecutive times within a 7-day window, so relatively short window, and go actually take the exam in that another 7-day window. We never had a person who failed either, for that matter, even our PMP, PGMP, or PfMP. We also have money back guarantee. Now, because our skin is in the game, we put the threshold higher at 85% consecutive. But our method has been, as far as we know, 100% pass rate. And that record just stands on its own. Additional features, I mentioned the money back guarantee, 85%. The threshold is higher because really our skin is quite in the game. And what we do is if you fail, we'll pay the re-exam fee. If you fail again, we pay the re-exam fee again. And finally, if you ever failed that many, which we never had once, of course, we would have refund the rest of the fee that you paid at that point. And we'll refund up to that fee or the re-exam fees. So I think that's pretty generous and comprehensive. We also do price matching. And let me be clear, we believe we are the best in the industry, and we will stay to be the best, both in terms of the product, the features, the instructor quality, the support that we provide, the exam simulator. If you believe you find a better price, more competitive than ours, please let us know, and we will try to beat it. But I do want to be clear, it needs to be from another REP. It's not from any mom and pop shop, spurting out to give these training. And if we can't match it for whatever reason, then we'll grant you access to our exam simulator for a limited time as our thank you for showing us that there may be a better price out there. But we'll be very interested to see that. In addition to our bootcamp, we also offer a wide range of cost-effective solutions, including some free resources. We do make our pre-recorded course available on itself. You could buy it. The exam simulator, even though the exam simulator test bank is smaller than the one that you get in the full bootcamp, we do have written books on portfolio management, and we also have LinkedIn support forum for both PgMP and PfMP. And I do have to say our PgMP is just getting started, so bear with us. It's starting out is always hard. Some of the books we recently published, mostly on the portfolio management side, even though I'm working on a book on program management as well. This book, by the way, published actually by PMI, is a companion guide to the standard for portfolio management. I was one of the core team committee member, and so is my colleague here. You could see Dr. Panos Chatsapanos. Both of us work with 6 other members of the core committee, so total 8 contributing to this book. And given we have 6 minutes left, very quickly, as a part of the webinar, we offer this special. The first special, by the way, is our standard special we're trying out for limited time. And this is basically providing a flat 40% discount to the first 2 seats available in our public courses, period. It has to be 2 paid. So if you register, it doesn't really count. You have to pay it in time. It's first come, first serve. Right, so a flat 40% discount, and we call it the very early bird discount because we do have an early bird discount. If you register 45 days in advance, you get 20% discount. So not obviously it's quite as generous as that. As another special for the webinar, for attendees of this webinar,
using this reference code, we're extending a 25% discount in case you didn't make the 40% discount and we'll make that available until end of August 2019. On top of that, we also offer a 1 round of free review of your application, should you be in that process. So to be clear, the payment have to receive by August 31st. So that's what we're offering. One natural question you may have is, of course, for the very early bird discount, how do you know which class is available? Since that changes on a minute's notice, email us and we'll tell you if it's available or not. And if you're interested in a couple of sessions, then obviously as you further look ahead in the future, more likely that there are still availability for that discount. Some of our future PgMP, PfMP courses, as you can see, we train around the country, to some extent internationally too, but usually those are more on-site with clients. We have courses coming up in DC in September and October for PgMP and PfMP. Our base is in Northern Jersey and New York City, so we tend to offer the most activity there. Boston in March and beginning of April next year, Chicago in May next year, Dallas also in May next year, Los Angeles coming up in January of 2020. On top of that, we have live virtual sessions as well, and you can see that in that box. With that said, I have 3 minutes to spare, and I'd be happy to stay on longer should there be questions, of course. Are there any questions from the team, from people here? Okay. Given that most of this presentation are actually technical material or business material about the PgMP, program management, portfolio management, you also claim up to 1 hour or 1 PDU for those of you who have PMPs or others. So you can see the rough breakdown here on the PDUs that you can claim. And then finally, any questions before we end the session? The last page here, you have contact information, my information, email. You also see our major landing pages for PgMP, PfMP. You can see our standard discounts. One thing I should mention, this webinar is a part of our monthly webinar series, but after this, we may spin this out and do it on a regular basis just for PgMP and PfMP itself. But if you're interested in a regular webinar, we offer monthly, as I mentioned. And you can find out at the last link here some of our previous topics in the recording, as well as future topics as they come up. And to answer the question, somebody did submit a private question, can we get this recording for this webinar? Yes, this webinar will be posted online once we have a chance to process this over the next couple of days, and we'll send out the link. But you could actually just check back here, www.pmoadvisory.com/webinar, and once it's posted, it will be available on that site. Are there further questions? Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's time and thank you for staying until the very end. If you have questions beyond this, you have my email address. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful day.